Story 1. A Date with Danger. My name is Alex, and at the time, I was a sophomore at Portland State University. Anyone familiar with the area knows it has its share of shady spots. I had recently gone through a messy breakup with my high school girlfriend, and in an attempt to move on, I downloaded a dating app. That's when I came across a girl named Melanie. Melanie seemed perfect, or at least, her profile did. She had dark brown hair, a radiant smile, and claimed to love hiking, just like me. We chatted for a week, bonding over a shared love of nature documentaries and a mutual disdain for pineapple on pizza. It felt like we were on the same wavelength. Eventually, I suggested meeting up for coffee, and she agreed. She proposed meeting at a street corner near the downtown district, saying she'd pick me up from there since it was close to her place. It was a little unconventional, but I didn't think much of it. At 8:30 p.m., I made my way to the designated spot, a quiet, dimly lit intersection bordered by a few run-down buildings. I texted her my location as she'd asked and waited. Minutes later, a car rolled down the street toward me. My heart raced with anticipation, but when the car stopped and the driver lowered the window, it wasn't Melanie. It was an older man. He looked to be in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and a weathered face that seemed to belong more to a trucker than someone's father. He leaned out and asked, "You Alex?" His question sent a ripple of unease through me. "Yeah, who are you?" The man gave me a tight-lipped smile. "I'm Melanie's dad. She sent me to pick you up." Red flags immediately went up in my mind. For one thing, Melanie never mentioned her dad would be involved. For another, the man's demeanor was off too stiff to rehearsed. "Why didn't she tell me you'd be picking me up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "She doesn't like meeting strangers alone," he said smoothly. This is just her way of being safe. Something about his tone made my stomach churn. His explanation didn't add up. If Melanie was so cautious, why hadn't she mentioned this plan beforehand? I took a step back. "That's fine. I think I'll just text her and figure out another time to meet." The man's smile faltered. "No need for that. I can take you to her now." My instincts screamed at me to leave. "Thanks, but I'll pass," I said firmly, turning to walk away. As I moved, I felt his gaze boring into my back. "Hey," he called, his voice sharp now. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I kept walking, my pace quickening with every step. When I reached the next block, I glanced over my shoulder and froze. The car was creeping along behind me, its headlights off. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Melanie. "Why didn't you get in the car with my dad?" My blood turned cold. Ignoring the text, I turned down an alley and broke into a jog, zigzagging through streets in an attempt to lose the car. When I finally emerged onto a busier road, I ducked into a convenience store and hid near the back, pretending to browse. Peering out the window, I spotted the car parked across the street. The man was sitting inside, staring directly at the store. My phone buzzed again. "I don't like being ignored, Alex." "Get in the car." Heart pounding, I flagged down the cashier and explained what was happening. She let me stay behind the counter while she called campus security. Eventually, the car drove off, but the fear lingered long after. Back in my dorm, I received one final message before blocking Melanie's number. "You're lucky you got away, you brat. I would have strangled your ugly ass." Story 2. Eyes in the Fields. The drive that evening had been supposed to be a moment of calm, a chance to escape the noise of the city. The countryside stretched out before me, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, the fields of crops swaying gently in the breeze. I had taken the scenic route, thinking it would clear my head, but something about the drive changed the moment I ventured too far into the heart of the farmlands. I didn't notice it at first, just the hum of the tires against the road, the occasional rustle of the wind through the crops. But then, out of the corner of my eye, something moved. A shadow, tall and out of place among the rows of corn. I slowed the car instinctively, peering into the field, but I couldn't see it clearly anymore. Just the deepening dusk, the long shadows stretching across the earth. Probably a scarecrow, I muttered, my hands tightening on the steering wheel as I tried to push the unease from my mind. After all, what else could it be? There was no reason to let it unsettle me. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I continued driving, the quiet of the road filling the car, my eyes scanning the edges of the fields. Then, a few minutes later, I saw it again. A figure tall, impossibly thin standing, still among the corn. It was barely visible, blending in with the shadows cast by the setting sun, but I saw it. Saw the way it didn't move, the way it almost seemed to absorb the darkening world around it. I stopped the car, my breath catching in my throat. The engine idled, a soft hum filling the silence as I rolled down the window, calling out, "Hey, do you need help?" My voice sounded too loud, too eager, but I had to know. I had to break the silence somehow. There was no answer, no movement. The figure stayed exactly where it was. Then slowly, as if acknowledging my presence, it shifted back into the cornfield. It didn't turn to run, didn't approach or retreat with urgency. It simply faded into the rows, disappearing as though it had never been there at all. A strange chill washed over me. I started the car again, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the wheel. But something was wrong, something I couldn't place. I wasn't just scared, I felt watched. I felt like I had just disturbed something, a quiet ritual in the field that I wasn't meant to see. As I drove on, the fields seemed to stretch forever, the road twisting between the crops. And with every passing moment, I saw them figures. Shadows at first, just barely discernible, hidden within the tall corn. They were everywhere. Some at the edges of the field, just standing there, and others further back, buried in the depths of the rows. I couldn't make out their faces if they had any, but I knew they were there, watching. It was impossible to ignore them, impossible to pretend I was just imagining it. The car felt too small, too exposed on the long stretch of road, and the feeling of their eyes, though I couldn't see them, pressed into the back of my mind like an unbearable weight. I pressed down harder on the accelerator, desperate to escape the stretch of road that seemed to grow darker with every passing second. The shadows deepened around me, and I realized I was driving faster than I ever had before. But no matter how fast I went, I couldn't escape the feeling that they were following, moving with me. And then, just when I thought I had left it behind, I saw it one of the figures, standing directly in the center of the road behind my car. My heart leaped into my throat. It was motionless, its long limbs seeming to stretch unnaturally toward me. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror to confirm if it had moved closer, but I didn't need to. I could feel its presence, its stillness, a presence that wasn't right. I drove straight home after that, my hands clenched on the wheel, not daring to stop. Every turn of the road felt like a countdown until I reached the safety of my house. But even once I got inside, locked all the doors, and closed the curtains, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, something watching from the shadows of the fields. It's been days since that drive, and I've told myself it was just a trick of the light, that it was just the dusk playing tricks on me. But late at night, when the world is quiet and the darkness presses into close, I can't shake the thought that maybe I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And sometimes, I swear, I can hear the rustling of corn in the wind, even though there's no field for miles. I think maybe they're still watching. Story 3. Something in the crops. I had nowhere to go after my parents kicked me out. So I ended up at my aunt and uncle's ranch, a place I hadn't visited much as a kid. The house was ancient, creaking with every gust of wind, and smelled of dust and old memories. The walls were lined with old paintings, including a large portrait of an imposing man with a grim expression, which always felt like it was watching me. It wasn't comforting, but I had no choice. The room they gave me was small, with a low ceiling and heavy curtains that blocked out the light. The first few days were uneventful. I spent my time wandering the land, checking the fence, and doing odd chores. But as night fell, things started to change. It began with faint whispers on the wind, almost inaudible, like voices carried from far off. But there was something unnerving about them. The sounds were distant, but as I stood still, they seemed to grow closer. I convinced myself it was just the wind rustling through the trees, but that didn't explain the feeling of being watched. One evening, I returned home late after helping my uncle with the barn. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the yard. As I passed by the edge of the field, I heard the sound of footsteps in the crops, slow and deliberate. I stopped, straining to listen, my heart beating faster. There was no wind to rustle the crops. Someone or something was out there. I rushed inside, my mind racing with confusion and fear, and found my aunt sitting at the kitchen table. She was reading a book and didn't seem to notice my sudden panic. "Aunt Claire," I gasped. "There's someone in the fields, I swear." I heard them walking. She didn't look alarmed, though. She just nodded and calmly told me to get some sleep. "You're just hearing things," she said. "It's probably a deer or a coyote." But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the silence, broken only by the distant, eerie calls of night animals. Suddenly, there was a soft tap on my window. I froze, my pulse quickening. It was barely audible, but unmistakable. Someone or something was outside. I stood up slowly, my feet dragging as I approached the window. I pulled back the curtain, and there, just beyond the porch light, stood a figure. The figure was tall and thin, crouched low to the ground, watching me with wide, dark eyes that reflected the faint light from the window. It didn't move, not even a twitch. I backed away in a panic, almost knocking over a chair in my haste. I didn't know what to do, so I ran to my aunt's room and shook her awake. "Aunt Claire, there's someone out there," I gasped. But instead of getting up, she sighed and muttered something under her breath. "It's just a neighbor or someone passing by. Go back to sleep." That was when I heard it again. Soft, deliberate taps against the glass, almost as if it was trying to get my attention. I didn't dare look out the window again, but my curiosity tugged at me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. Something was out there, something that didn't belong. The next morning, my uncle was already up, tending to the animals. I told him what had happened, but he just shook his head. "I don't know what you think you saw, but there's nothing out there. We don't get visitors out here, not after dark." I wasn't convinced. That evening, I went outside to check the crops, hoping to find some sign that would explain what had happened. But everything looked the same rows of corn, still and silent under the moonlight. Then I heard the same footsteps from the night before, but this time, it was closer. I quickly turned to head back to the house when I felt something cold brush against my ankle, like a hand. I yanked my foot away and spun around, but there was nothing. The feeling of being watched intensified, and before I could think, I heard my uncle's voice shouting from the porch, "Get inside now." I didn't question him. I ran inside, breathless, and locked the door behind me. But as I stood by the window, looking out at the field, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something moving fast across the crops at unnatural speed, like something that darted through the plants. The following day, my uncle installed cameras around the property, thinking it would help protect us from whatever was out there. But no one ever found any signs of a break-in. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the crops, silent as ever. A few weeks passed, and the sense of unease never quite left. The thing in the crops was still out there, watching us, waiting for something. My uncle swore it was just the wind, but I knew what I'd seen. Something was wrong. Something was lurking in those fields, and it wasn't going away.